The city exhales a pale winter light over Lawrence Park, a quiet rectangle of stone paths and bare-limbed trees where old men argue with pigeons and steam curls from street carts like unanswered prayers. On a concrete chess table modeled with rings of melted snow, a small black girl sits alone, bundled in a denim jacket too thin for the season. Her braids are tied with red thread. A worn backpack rests at her feet, carefully zipped, as if guarding the sum of a childhood. She is set white against black and plays both sides, hand to hand, a whispered rhythm of soft taps on marble. Pawn forward, knight arcs, bishop slides through silence. Each move lands with a certainty beyond her years, the certainty of someone who has learned the map of survival by memorizing every square. He notices her before he admits he has stopped to look. Adrian Vale, whose name is printed on glass towers and philanthropy plaques, whose algorithms instruct money how to breathe, has come to the park to take a call that does not require anyone to see him listening. His coat is charcoal, his scarf a disciplined knot, his shoes an apology to the wet stone. A discreet car idles at the curb, the driver studying raindrops. On Adrian's wrist, a bracelet of data. The watch counts and categorizes his life in neat numbers. He tells himself he is here for 10 minutes of air. But he is held by the sight of the girl's hands. The right hovers, calculating. The left warms itself in her pocket. She speaks without looking up, as if sensing him the way a leaf senses the wind. "You're late," she says, not to scold him, but like someone announcing the weather. Adrian thinks she must be talking to the person he is, the one whose breath fogs the air beside him. "Excuse me?" "You're late for your life," she answers, and then she lifts a knight and rests it where a knight does not belong. A sacrilege that forces him to study the board. It is not a mistake. What looks like chaos is a trap built from patience. A net of angles he would have missed if he were still on his call counting opportunities. Her eyes, when they finally rise, are the color of strong tea and older than winter. "Do you play?" He almost says no, the way he almost says no to helping anyone who could slow him. He is a man of measured gifts. Money when audited, time when efficient, kindness when it can be named strategy. A billion spreadsheets have taught him to evaluate risk. A girl in a park promises nothing except complication. Yet he hears himself say, sometimes. The bench opposite her is wet. She pulls a folded plastic bag from her backpack and smooths it onto the stone like a royal invitation. "Sit. White or black?" The question is simple and not simple at all. He takes white out of habit, out of a history of first moves. She nods as if that is what she expected a man like him to do. He removes his gloves and sets them on the table. His hands are clean and cold. They play. He opens with a familiar line intended to test the shape of her courage. She answers with a line that pretends to retreat, then shows its teeth 2 moves later. He defends, improvises, corrects. She breathes quietly, a small fog library in the air between them. The park hushes around the rhythm of their thinking. A dog shakes rain from its coat, and the droplets sound like beads scattering across a wooden floor. "Where are your people?" he asks, when a pause permits small talk to disguise curiosity. She touches a pawn but does not move it. "In all directions." The answer is not cruel, only honest. "Where are yours?" He glances at the waiting car, the numbers he could call to assemble an army of assistants. His phone trembles with another message. A board member wants a decision. A journalist wants a quote. A foundation gala needs his face. He silences it with a thumb. "Everywhere," he says, but the word thins as it leaves his mouth. She leans in, studying a diagonal. The small scars on her knuckles look like constellations nobody has named. "You don't look like a man who belongs to everywhere," she says softly. "You look like a man who belongs to no one." The line lands in him like a stone dropped into still water. Rings widen through rooms he thought were locked. The emptiness of his penthouse at night, the thwarted echo of footsteps that come home to no laughter, the calendar that functions as a shield. He clears his throat. "What's your name?" "Zuri." She says it the way one says a promise. "What's yours?" He almost offers the version people say to cameras, but he offers his first name instead, as if he has handed her his coat in a storm. Adrian. Okay, Adrian. She moves the bishop with a tender certainty that frightens him more than aggression. Check. He stares down. The move is beautiful and merciless. He escapes with a knight he had forgotten could protect him. They circle again. A gust lifts a napkin into flight. It lands, surrendered, on the wet path. Pigeons rearrange themselves around the table. A gray parliament. When the board opens and he senses advantage, his chest tightens with a familiar electric taste. The sweet metal of domination. He thinks of acquisition, of the art of anticipating a man's need before he has named it. He advances his queen. It is the right move on paper. It is the wrong move against a child who has learned that paper burns. Zuri smiles without showing teeth. I like your queen, she says, and then she shows him what he missed. A sequence so simple and inevitable that he has to laugh to keep from acknowledging the ache it creates. 2 more pieces fall, and then a quiet word that is not triumph but truth. Checkmate. He sits back. His watch vibrates. The car idles. Pigeons murmur. The park breathes. How did you? She shrugs, as if their game were a conversation about whether that turned out to be about something else. She studies him, not cruelly, not hungrily, just with a compassion as steady as the winter light. You move fast, she says, except in the place that matters. And where is that? He hears himself ask like a student lost in a problem that refuses to stay on the page. She points not to his chest, which would be obvious, but to the space between them, where a velvet of cold air glows with their breath. Here, between people. It is an answer he cannot file. He gathers his gloves to cover the discomfort of feeling seen. He could stand, apologize for disturbing her game, return to the engine of his life and the places where money solves most riddles. He could leave this park the way one leaves a dream, blaming the weather. Do you have a place to go? He asks, and the question tastes like failure, the way a man asks after he has already decided he does not have time for the answer. She looks down at the backpack by her feet, then up at the winter sky, a lid of pewter. I go to tomorrow, she says, in a tone that makes tomorrow sound like a neighborhood without maps. He grips the edge of the table. The stone is slick with a seam of melted snow. He imagines her walking into dusk alone, a small light without a socket. He imagines doing nothing and the way that, too, will feel like a choice pressed into the ledger of his life. A line item with consequences. Zuri reaches into her backpack and pulls out something he does not expect. A single white queen carved from a different set than the one on the table. Its crown nicked, its base smooth from years of touch. She sets it near his glove. People leave pieces behind, she says. Sometimes I keep them safe. He stares. The queen is warm from her pocket, absurdly warm, as if it remembers hands and voices. A draft threads through the bare branches, and for a fraction of an instant the park grows still in a way that feels like listening. The wind ceases, a pigeon pauses mid-step, the car's exhaust loses its rhythm and then finds it again. It is nothing. It is everything. He thinks of an old lullaby he has not heard since he was small, and he cannot say why. Play one more? She asks, but the question contains something larger. It is not about the board. It is about whether he will allow a different pattern to unfold than the pattern he has perfected. Adrian looks at the waiting car, at the silent phone, at the small queen near his hand radiating a human heat. He looks at Zuri, who has mastered the art of surviving without making anyone feel responsible for it. The old rules whisper their exits. New ones wait like unopened doors. His fingers touch the pawn and hold. The marble is cold and honest. Your move, Zuri says, almost a blessing. He nods once, not to her, but to the version of himself that is brave only when the world can see it. He moves the pawn forward a single square, as if testing how much of a life can change in the smallest distance. The board lies between them like a quiet witness, the pawns still frozen in the second game they never began. Adrian's phone vibrates once, twice, then falls still, as if conceding that he is lost to another call. His driver leans on the horn, a sharp reminder that the world of obligations ticks on. But Adrian does not rise. He finds himself studying Zuri the way he studies a business venture, looking for risk for hidden cost. Except here, the figures will not resolve. Do you play often? He asks, his tone tentative. When the tables are empty, she replies. Sometimes the old men let me play. Most just laugh. But chess doesn't laugh at me. It listens. She tilts her head toward the bench beside them, where a crumpled paper bag holds a half-eaten sandwich. It keeps me company when nothing else does. He frowns, unsettled. The sentence sounds too practiced, like something she has had to explain too many times. A gust rattles the trees, shaking loose a flurry of brittle leaves. He imagines her sleeping somewhere in this park, the weight of winter pressing against her small frame. A girl too clever for the streets, playing chess against shadows because people are unreliable. You have no family? The words escape him before he can refine them. Her eyes flick toward the fountain at the park's center, where icy water still trickles. Family is when somebody waits for you to come back. I don't have that right now. A pang, sharp as glass, twists in Adrian's chest. He remembers coming home from long flights to silence, the sterile comfort of staff who prepared his meals but not his heart. He wonders if he has a family, or merely a surname engraved on buildings. He clears his throat. What about school? School waits for kids who can prove an address. She offers a small, knowing smile. I can't prove much of anything. He stares at her thin jacket, her fingers red with cold. In his world, solutions are immediate: funding, connections, influence. But this problem is not an equation to be solved with numbers. It is a face. It is Zuri. The driver honks again. Adrian turns, irritated, and signals for patience. When he looks back, Zuri is already gathering her pieces. She places the carved white queen back into her pocket, like a relic she cannot lose. You should go, she says. Men like you don't belong in places like this. The dismissal strikes him strangely, as though she is protecting him from herself. He shakes his head. I don't belong in many places, he admits, surprising himself. The confession feels like a stone lifted off his chest. For a moment, silence stretches between them. Then he hears himself offer words that are both clumsy and heavy. Do you want to come eat? Her eyes widen, suspicion flickering like a street lamp. Eat. There's a cafe down the block. He hesitates, aware of how his invitation sounds, like charity, like a billionaire's guilty whim. You could use something warm. So could I. Zuri studies him for a long time. She has learned to measure people not by what they promise but by what they fail to deliver. Finally, she nods once. Okay, but no pity. None, he replies, though he knows pity has been the foundation of many of his donations. What she demands is different. Respect. Equality. A game played on the same board. They walk together. The car crawls behind them, confused. Adrian waves it off. The driver hesitates, then pulls away, leaving Adrian on the sidewalk beside a girl whose shoes flap at the heels. Passers-by stare at the odd pair, the man in tailored wool and the child in fraying denim. But Adrian feels strangely lighter, as if he is carrying less than usual. Inside the cafe, warmth embraces them. The air smells of coffee and cinnamon. Zuri presses her hands to the mug he orders for her, her eyes half closed as if she is holding sunlight. Adrian watches, realizing how little he knows about comfort when he has purchased it his whole life. Between bites of bread, she asks suddenly, "Why did you stop for me?" He blinks. "I don't know." "You do," she says gently. "You just don't want to say it yet." Her words unravel him. For years he has spoken with certainty to investors, to boards, to cameras. Yet here, before a child, he cannot summon one solid reason for his choice. He only knows that leaving her in the park felt like abandoning something he could never buy back. The cafe hums with low conversations, the hiss of milk steaming. Yet, at their small table, an invisible thread has been tied. He senses it tugging at him, delicate yet impossible to ignore. By the time they step back into the fading daylight, Adrian knows this is not chance. It is crossroads. The kind that separates a life lived in marble towers from a life that might finally mean something. He turns to her, his voice quiet. "Where will you go tonight?" She shrugs. "Wherever tomorrow waits." And in that instant, Adrian Vale, who has made empires from certainty, makes a decision born of faith instead of logic. "Then tonight," he says, "you'll come with me." Her eyes widen again, but she does not speak. The city hums around them, a great indifferent machine. Yet between a man and a girl on the sidewalk, something irreversible has begun. The ride in the car feels like stepping into another universe. Zuri sits rigid in the back seat of the dark sedan. Her small body pressed against the door as though she might vanish into it if she tried hard enough. The leather seats gleam, polished and perfumed, a world away from the concrete bench where she had been playing alone. She clutches her backpack tight, her eyes darting between the tinted windows and the driver's steady gaze in the mirror. Adrian sits beside her, uncharacteristically silent. Usually, car rides are filled with calls, screens, and strategy. But tonight, his phone remains dark in his pocket. He studies the reflection of the girl beside him in the glass, noticing details he had missed in the park. The careful braids that speak of hands that once loved her, the worn jacket that someone had patched twice, the way she bites her lip when the car accelerates. "Do you trust me?" he asks suddenly, his voice gentler than he expects. Zuri turns, her expression unreadable. "I don't trust cars, but I'm watching you." A faint smile touches his mouth. "That's fair." They arrive at the skyscraper that carries his name in brass letters. The doorman stiffens when he sees Zuri, his professional smile faltering. Adrian notices, and for the first time in years he feels ashamed of the space he commands. He places a hand lightly on Zuri's shoulder and guides her in, a silent declaration that she belongs. The elevator hums as it ascends into the sky. Zuri presses her fingers against the glass panel, watching the city shrink below. "It looks like a board," she murmurs. "Squares and lights. Someone moving pieces." Her words lodge in him like prophecy. He clears his throat. "Maybe it is." The doors open onto a penthouse of steel and glass. The space is immaculate, curated, and cold. The city glows beneath the wide windows, but there are no photographs, no clutter, no trace of laughter. Just silence waiting for an echo. Zuri steps in cautiously like a bird testing a cage. She drops her backpack by the door and walks across the polished floor, her reflection gliding beside her. "It's too clean," she says. "No one really lives here." Adrian's chest tightens. He wants to argue, to insist that this is his home, but her words dissolve every defense. The truth is too sharp. He lives here, but he has never belonged here. She touches the edge of the dining table. "Do you ever eat here?" "Rarely." "Then why is it so big?" The simplicity of her question stuns him. He has no answer. Later, he heats soup, awkwardly, as though domesticity were a foreign language. Zuri sits at the counter, chin resting on her hand, watching him fumble with ladles and spoons. When he sets the bowl before her, steam curling upward, she smiles faintly. "You don't look like a man who cooks." "I don't." He pauses. "Not until now." They eat in silence, broken only by the faint clink of spoons. Outside, the city roars in muffled waves, but inside, a fragile stillness grows. Afterward, Zuri explores the apartment, peering into vast rooms lined with books that have never been touched, guest rooms without guests, corridors that echo with emptiness. She pauses in the living room, gazing at the towering windows. "You have all this space," she says softly, "but you're lonelier than me." Her words are not cruel. They are observation, spoken like the conclusion of a chess game. Adrian feels stripped bare. He swallows hard, unable to deny it. As night deepens, he finds her curled on the couch, her backpack tucked beneath her head like a pillow. He brings a blanket, draping it over her carefully. For a moment, he studies her small frame, listening to the even rhythm of her breathing. Then, almost without thought, he whispers, "You belong here more than I ever did." The city lights flicker beyond the glass, as though in answer. Morning creeps in quietly, gilding the skyline in shades of pale gold. Adrian stirs from a restless sleep in his room, his mind still replaying the sight of Zuri's tiny form curled on the couch. He rises earlier than usual, compelled by a strange, unfamiliar urgency. When he steps into the living room, he finds her awake, sitting cross-legged on the rug, arranging chess pieces on the glass coffee table as though marking territory. "You start," she says without looking up. He rubs his eyes. "No breakfast first?" Her lips curve faintly. "Chess is breakfast." He chuckles, an unguarded sound he hardly recognizes as his own, and takes a seat. The game begins in quiet concentration, the clicking of pieces filling the emptiness once held only by silence. For a while, the world reduces itself to 64 squares, and Adrian feels the strangest peace. As the game unfolds, he studies her face. The way her brow furrows in thought, the sharp intelligence shining in her eyes. She is a child, yet she carries herself with the gravity of someone who has been forced to negotiate survival daily. He wonders how many battles she has fought outside the board, alone. When she traps his rook with a sly smile, he leans back and shakes his head. "You play like someone who doesn't fear losing." "I already lost a lot," she replies simply. "Now I just play to see what can happen." The words pierce him, carrying a wisdom no child should bear. He realizes that this girl is not simply clever. She is resilient, carved by hardship into something rare and luminous. Later, Adrian takes her on a walk through the city. She clutches her backpack, wary of the stares that follow them. The wealthy tycoon in a tailored coat and the small homeless girl beside him. But Adrian ignores the gazes. He points out landmarks as they go. The theater district, the old library. Though his voice falters, because for the first time he notices how these shining towers cast shadows deep enough to swallow children like Zuri. They stop at a bookstore where he often buys rare volumes. Inside, the owner greets him warmly, but his smile dims when he sees Zuri. Adrian feels the weight of judgment in the air and, without thinking, lays a hand on her shoulder. "She's with me." The man nods stiffly, pretending acceptance, but the damage is done. Zuri's eyes harden, though she says nothing. Adrian feels shame burn through him, not at her presence, but at the world's blindness. In the children's section, Zuri runs her fingers across the spines. She lingers at a book of fairy tales, lifting it as though it were fragile crystal. "Do people really believe these stories?" she asks. "They're meant to remind us," Adrian answers softly, "that miracles happen when love is stronger than fear." She turns the book over, thoughtful. "Then maybe fairy tales are truer than the news." He buys it for her, ignoring the cashier's raised brow. As they step outside, a wind sweeps through the street, carrying a flurry of leaves despite the season's lateness. Zuri hugs the book to her chest, and for an instant, Adrian swears he sees light ripple across her face like a blessing. That night, back at the penthouse, she asks if she can read aloud. Her voice, halting but steady, fills the cavernous space with a tale about a lost prince who finds family not in castles, but in a shepherd's cottage. Adrian listens, transfixed. Each word seems to chip away at the icy walls of his solitude. When she finishes, she closes the book and looks at him. "You remind me of the prince," she says. "I don't live in a cottage," he replies wryly. "No," she says firmly, "but you're still lost." Her certainty disarms him. For the first time, Adrian wonders if she has been sent into his life not as someone to be rescued, but as someone to rescue him. The city hums beneath them, a restless body of light and sound. But inside Adrian's penthouse, the world has narrowed to two lives cautiously orbiting each other. Days begin to gather like pages in a book neither expected to write. What was meant to be temporary, one night's shelter, quietly expands into something else. Adrian wakes earlier now, drawn by the muffled sounds of Zuri moving about. He finds her perched on the balcony railing one dawn, her breath making clouds in the cold air. His chest tightens at the sight of her so small against the vast city skyline. "Careful," he says, stepping closer. She glances back at him, eyes steady. I'm not afraid of falling. He swallows. You should be. She shakes her head. Sometimes falling is the only way you see what's below. The words stay with him, repeating like a refrain he cannot silence. That morning he makes breakfast himself. The kitchen is usually tended by staff, but he dismisses them before they arrive. His first attempts at pancakes come out uneven, too crisp at the edges, but Zuri eats with delight, syrup clinging to her fingers. She grins at him through a mouthful. You cook like you play chess. Surprising, but messy. He laughs, and the sound startles him. The penthouse, once an echo chamber, absorbs it like thirsty soil. Over the days that follow, small rituals bloom. They play chess nightly, often into hours when the city softens to whispers. She sprawls across the floor with the fairy tale book, reading aloud in fragments, sometimes adding her own endings. He listens, sometimes correcting her pronunciation, but mostly marveling at the courage of her voice filling the cavernous rooms. One evening, as rain slashes against the windows, she asks about his family. You must have one, she says. A mother? A father? Somebody. His fork halts midair. He clears his throat. My parents are gone. Long gone. No siblings. No wife. No children. Her brow furrows. Then who waits for you to come back? The question slices deeper than any accusation. He sets the fork down. No one, I suppose. Then you're right, she says gently. You are lost. Her words sting not because they're cruel, but because they're true. He sees himself mirrored in her loneliness, and suddenly the emptiness of his wealth feels unbearable. The bond between them, fragile as a thread, begins to thicken. Adrian takes her to his office one afternoon, unsure why. His staff gape at the sight of a young girl in tattered clothes stepping through glass doors etched with his name. Zuri studies the desks, the glowing screens, the executives in suits that blur together like an army. Everyone here looks the same, she whispers. Like pawns. He almost scolds her, but then realizes she's right. She moves between the polished tables with a sharp eye, as though she sees patterns no one else notices. One of his advisors pulls him aside, whispering that bringing her here is inappropriate. Adrian's jaw tightens. She's my guest, he replies firmly. Later, he finds Zuri standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, gazing down at the city. It looks different from up here, she says. Like you own all the pieces. Do you think I do? He asks, curious. She shakes her head. Pieces can walk away, even queens. He stares at her, struck by the weight of her metaphor. For years he has lived convinced control was everything. Yet here is a child who knows that control is an illusion. Back at the penthouse, she begins to leave her mark in ways small but unmistakable. A drawing taped to the refrigerator. A line of pawns balanced on the windowsill like soldiers watching the city. A laugh echoing down the hallway at odd hours. The home that once felt sterile now breathes with her presence. But beneath the warmth lies fragility. Adrian catches himself wondering, how long can this last? What will happen when someone comes looking for her? One evening, he asks quietly, do you have anyone at all? Anyone who might miss you? Zuri's face darkens. My mother. She hesitates. She was sick, couldn't keep me. She said she'd come back. But she didn't. The silence that follows is thick with pain unsaid. Adrian wants to promise her safety, to swear he will not leave, but the words catch in his throat. He knows promises can fracture under pressure. Instead, he says softly, you're safe here, as long as you want. Her eyes search his face, looking for cracks. Then slowly she nods. As weeks pass, small miracles weave through the ordinary. One night, Adrian lies awake, restless, haunted by numbers and deadlines. Then, faintly, he hears a hum. It drifts through the apartment like smoke. Zuri, singing a lullaby to herself in the living room. The melody is fragile, off-key, yet something about it stills his pulse. He falls asleep before he knows it, the sound carrying him into rest like a gentle tide. Another day, While he stares at documents, she places the carved white queen on his desk. "To remind you," she says simply and walks away. He doesn't ask what she means, but the piece remains there, glowing like a sentinel. He begins canceling meetings. He spends more time at home. His colleagues whisper about distraction, about softness. But he feels something awakening inside him, something no profit margin could measure. One rainy evening, as thunder mutters across the city, Zuri looks up from a game of chess and asks, "Why do you help me? Really?" Adrian leans back, struggling for words. Finally, he says, "Because you remind me of something I thought I lost." She tilts her head. "What?" "Belief," he admits. Her smile is small but radiant, yet shadows lurk at the edges of their fragile haven. Adrian notices men in suits whispering when he brings her out. He hears murmurs about reputation, responsibility, risk. Some question whether keeping a homeless child in his penthouse is appropriate. Others whisper of legal consequences, guardianship, custody. But when Zuri sits across from him, her small hands cradling the queen piece like a talisman, all doubts fall silent. He knows deep down that she has changed the rules of his life forever. One evening, she surprises him with words he didn't expect. "Do you ever wish you had a daughter?" The question lodges in his throat. He swallows hard. "Yes," he whispers, "though I never thought it was possible." Zuri studies him with quiet intensity, then places the queen in the center of the board. "Then maybe you just didn't wait long enough." The words settle over him like a blessing. And so, night by night, meal by meal, game by game, a man once defined by wealth and solitude and a girl once defined by absence begin to write a new definition together. Something that feels almost like family. But just as the bond roots itself, fate sharpens its knives. For the world is not kind to fragile miracles, and soon their quiet home will be tested in ways neither can prepare for. The days take on a rhythm that neither Adrian nor Zuri names aloud, for fear that naming it will make it fragile. Morning begins with pancakes that grow less misshapen with each attempt. Afternoon sometimes brings long walks where Adrian points out landmarks, and Zuri teaches him to see them differently, not as property to be owned, but as spaces where lives unfold. Evenings belong to chess and stories, the fairy tale book now dog-eared from constant reading. But beneath the warmth, a storm brews. Adrian's absence from boardrooms and dinners does not go unnoticed. His colleagues whisper, investors grow uneasy, and the media begins to stir. A man of his stature sheltering a homeless child is a story too tempting for silence. One late afternoon, as twilight paints the city in bruised shades of violet, Adrian receives a call. The screen flashes with his attorney's name. Reluctantly, he answers. "Adrian, we need to talk." The voice says, clipped, "There are questions being raised." About the girl. Adrian's grip tightens. Her name is Zuri. Names matter little to the court. They're asking, who is she to you? Why is she living in your home without guardianship papers? If this surfaces publicly, it could be damaging. Damaging to whom? Adrian snaps. To her or to me? The silence on the other end is its own answer. Adrian ends the call without farewell. He turns to find Zuri watching from the hallway, her book clutched tight to her chest. She does not ask, but her eyes already know. "They don't want me here," she says quietly. He crosses the room, kneels to meet her gaze. "That's not true. I want you here. But do you want me enough to fight them?" Her voice trembles, a mixture of defiance and fear. Adrian swallows hard. Yes, more than anything. The next days unfold in unease. At the office, advisors corner him with concerns. At home, reporters begin lurking near the tower, cameras like vultures. Zuri becomes restless, pacing the penthouse as if its glass walls are closing in. One evening, during a thunderstorm that rages like a drumbeat of fate, she breaks down. "I don't belong anywhere," she cries, her small hands pressed to her temples. "First the shelters, then the streets, and now here. Everyone wants to move me like I'm a pawn." Her words slice through him. He gathers her into his arms, awkward at first, but then fiercely protective. "You are not a pawn," he whispers against her hair. "You are the queen. You are the most powerful piece on the board. And no one will take you from me." Thunder answers, shaking the windows. At that moment, a strange stillness falls within the storm, as though the city itself pauses to listen. For an instant, the power flickers, plunging the penthouse into darkness. Zuri tightens her grip on him, trembling. Then, as suddenly as it failed, the lights return. She looks up at him, wide-eyed. "Did you feel that?" "Yes," he breathes, but neither of them can explain it. The following morning, their fragile world cracks open. A woman arrives at the tower, thin, pale, eyes clouded with both hope and despair. Zuri freezes when she sees her. "Mom!" The word escapes as a whisper, half disbelief, half prayer. The woman nods, tears trembling on her lashes. "Zuri." Her voice is weak, as though pulled from the bottom of a well. Adrian's chest constricts. He steps forward cautiously. "You're her mother?" "Yes." Her cough interrupts, raw and jagged. "I've been sick. Couldn't care for her. I thought, if I left her, she'd find better. But I came back. I couldn't let her think I stopped loving her." Zuri clings to her, sobbing. For a moment, Adrian feels the ground fall away. The bond he has built is suddenly questioned, fragile as glass. That night, he lies awake listening to the soft sound of Zuri's mother coughing in the guest room. His heart wages war between reason and longing. He knows the law favors blood. He knows society will demand that he step aside. Yet when he closes his eyes, he hears Zuri's words echoing. "Do you want me enough to fight them?" The next days are filled with tension. Social services arrive asking questions. Papers are demanded, explanations required. Adrian's wealth, once his shield, becomes a target. "Why is a billionaire keeping a homeless child in his penthouse?" the headlines sneer. In public, he remains composed. In private, he unravels. He watches Zuri's mother grow weaker, her illness stripping her strength day by day. He watches Zuri torn between joy at her mother's return and terror at losing Adrian. One evening, Zuri sits between them, clutching both their hands. Her eyes are wet, but her voice is steady. "I don't want to choose. I love you both, but I don't want to be lost again." The plea shatters him. As the crisis peaks, Adrian faces the greatest test of his life. In the courtroom, lawyers debate guardianship. Papers shuffle like weapons. The judge listens with weary eyes. Zuri's mother speaks first, her voice frail but resolute. "I want my daughter safe. I want her loved. If I can't give her that much longer, then let him." She nods toward Adrian, tears streaking her face. "Let him be what I cannot." The room falls silent. Adrian feels his throat close. When it is his turn, he rises not as a billionaire, not as a man defending reputation, but as someone who has finally learned to tell the truth. "I may not share her blood," he says, voice trembling, "but she is my family. She is the piece that makes sense of the whole board. I will not let her fall back into shadows. I will fight for her, not because it looks good, not because it makes sense, but because love demands it." His words ripple through the chamber, breaking the sterile air like a tide. For a moment, even the judge lowers her gaze, moved. At that instant, a shaft of light pierces the courtroom window, though the day outside is gray and overcast. It falls across Zuri and her mother, illuminating them in gold. The crowd stirs, some whispering of coincidence, others of miracle. Adrian meets Zuri's gaze across the room. She smiles through tears, and he knows the game has changed forever. The judge's gavel falls, sharp and final, but her voice is softened by something almost maternal. This court recognizes the extraordinary circumstances. Guardianship of Zuri Vale is hereby granted to Adrian Vale, with the full blessing of her mother. The words ripple through the chamber like a tide breaking stone. Gasps scatter across the room. Some see scandal, others see salvation. But for Adrian, there is only the sight of Zuri, eyes wide, brimming with disbelief and joy as she rushes into his arms. Her mother watches, pale and trembling, but smiling through tears. Now, she whispers. She has two homes in one heart. Adrian kneels before her, voice low but fierce. I'll honor her, and you, always. She places her fragile hand over his. Then I can rest. The following weeks are threaded with both sorrow and sweetness. Zuri's mother grows weaker, her illness a tide that no wealth or medicine can hold back. Yet within the penthouse, now transformed from glass emptiness to a space of warmth, there is life, laughter, and a closeness none of them imagined. Adrian rearranges his schedule, canceling appearances, meetings, and galas. The man who once ruled his life by data and deadlines now measures it in shared meals and whispered stories. He reads aloud to Zuri and her mother at night, fumbling but earnest. Sometimes Zuri interrupts to add her own endings, and her mother laughs so hard she forgets her pain for a moment. On the nights when coughing racks her mother's body, Zuri hums that same lullaby, the one Adrian once heard drifting through the penthouse walls. Each time, the air feels charged, as if unseen hands hold them together. And each time, Adrian feels his own heart healed in ways logic cannot explain. One morning, her mother calls Adrian to her bedside. Her voice is weak, but steady. Promise me one thing, she says. Anything. Don't let her forget where she came from. Don't raise her in towers so high she can't hear the voices below. Let her remember the streets, the cold, the way it feels to be unseen. Because those memories, they make her strong. Adrian's throat tightens. I promise. She'll never forget. Neither will I. Her mother smiles faintly, relief softening her worn features. That night, she passes quietly, her last breath wrapped in the lullaby Zuri hums at her side. Zuri sobs against Adrian's chest, trembling with grief, but he holds her, whispering over and over, You're not alone. Not now. Not ever. The funeral is held beneath cherry blossoms, their pale petals drifting like gentle blessings on the mourner's shoulders. Adrian stands with Zuri, her small hand clutched in his, as they watch the casket lower. Tears streak his face, unhidden. He feels the finality, but also the strange peace that comes when love does not end with death. Zuri turns to him, voice breaking. Do you really mean it? That I'm not alone? He kneels, placing both hands on her shoulders. Zuri, you are my daughter, not by blood, but by every choice of my heart. And I will choose you, every day, for the rest of my life. She throws her arms around his neck, sobbing into him, and in that embrace, beneath the shower of blossoms, the fragile bond hardens into something unbreakable. Time begins to flow differently. The penthouse, once sterile, now rings with the sounds of living. There are drawings on the refrigerator, mismatched socks by the couch, laughter echoing down marble halls. Adrian discovers that he likes burnt pancakes if Zuri makes them, and Zuri discovers that she likes the way Adrian hums badly when concentrating on chess. One evening, months later, Adrian hosts a gathering, not a gala of investors, but a small circle of children and volunteers. Together, they inaugurate the Vale Foundation, dedicated to building shelters and schools for children like Zuri. At the center of the ribbon cutting stands Zuri herself, holding the scissors with a solemn pride far beyond her years. You built this, Adrian whispers to her as applause swells. No, she replies, eyes shining. We did. At night, when the city is quiet, they sometimes sit on the balcony together. The skyline glitters like a chessboard, and Zuri sets the carved queen piece between them. See? She says. She's still guarding us. Adrian smiles, the ache in his chest finally softened. She always will. On Zuri's first day of school, Adrian walks her to the gates himself. Other children turn to stare, but she lifts her chin high, clutching the fairy tale book in one hand. Before she disappears inside, she looks back at him. Don't forget to wait for me, she calls. He feels his eyes sting. Always. And as she vanishes into the sea of children, Adrian realizes that for the first time in his life, someone is coming back to him. Not for money, not for power, but for love. The sun sets on their balcony that evening, painting the city in fire. Adrian holds the chess queen in his hand, feeling its smooth surface warm against his palm. He whispers into the wind, as though to the mother who is gone. She is safe, she is loved, and she has given me back my life. A breeze stirs, lifting Zuri's laughter from inside the apartment, carrying it skyward. And in that sound, Adrian knows, the greatest miracle is not the towers he built, but the family he never thought possible. Months slip into a year, and the bond that began on a cold park bench has woven itself into a life neither Adrian nor Zuri imagined. The penthouse, once echoing with silence, now hums with the ordinary sounds of belonging. The scrape of Zuri's pencil across homework, the clatter of pans in a kitchen where mistakes are forgiven, the quiet exchange of jokes over late-night cocoa. The Vale Foundation grows quickly, not because of Adrian's wealth alone, but because of his changed heart. He no longer donates for prestige or headlines. He invests in children like Zuri, each one a life waiting to be heard. At the opening of a new youth center, Zuri stands beside him, ribbon in her hands. Cameras flash, but she is unbothered, her eyes searching only for his nod of encouragement. She reminds me of someone, a journalist remarks, smiling. Stubborn, brave. She reminds me of someone too, Adrian replies softly. Someone who saved me. One quiet Saturday morning, Zuri surprises him with breakfast she made herself. Burnt toast, unevenly scrambled eggs, juice spilled slightly on the tray. Adrian accepts it like it is a feast. Happy Father's Day, she says shyly. The words land with the force of a miracle. Adrian's throat tightens. He draws her into a hug, holding her so close that the world outside ceases to matter. Best gift I've ever received, he whispers. The epilogue arrives beneath the same cherry blossom trees where they once said farewell to her mother. This time, they are there not for mourning but for remembrance. Adrian and Zuri kneel side by side, scattering petals across the soil. Do you think she can see us? Zuri asks. Yes, Adrian answers, certain. And she's proud. Very proud. Zuri presses the carved white queen into the earth, resting it gently atop the blossoms. She'll guard us from here too. They stand hand in hand as petals drift, and the breeze carries Zuri's quiet laughter into the open sky. In the end, it was not towers of glass or rivers of money that wrote this story, but a simple act of stopping, of seeing one child alone at a chessboard, and choosing to sit across from her. From that choice grew a bond that neither blood nor law could define, but love could. The world tells us that wealth builds legacies, that power secures permanence. But the truth is quieter, deeper. The greatest legacy is love, the kind that listens, the kind that waits, the kind that chooses again and again. Adrian Vale, a man who once owned everything and felt nothing, discovered that the miracle he had sought was never in fortune or fame. It was in the laughter of a girl who had nothing but taught him everything. That the heart's truest victory is faith, that the richest inheritance is love, and that the smallest act of compassion can change the game forever. And so, in the quiet moves of love and truth, they found what both had needed all along, a family.